Welcome back, everyone. It's College Football with Sam here, and we have a lot to talk about today. It is 78 degrees Fahrenheit in my room with plenty of humidity, and I think outside it feels like it's 90, so it's pretty warm. But we're going to go through this. I'm going to give you some recruiting updates for a variety of schools and also go through which of the 2024 college football playoff participants are the most likely to regress. We're going to do all of that and more here on College Football with Sam. Before we get any further, I ask you to do a favor, and as Max Ellis says in the chat, smash the like button, hit the subscribe button, click the notification bell, be active in the chat, and if you're watching this or listening to it on YouTube after it's live or Spotify after I'm live and it's uploaded, comment your thoughts wherever you can. Thank you very much. How are you guys doing? I can tell you that I am scorching hot, as I think I already alluded to earlier, but outside of that, I'm good. Classes are getting back into it, taking a summer class here before the fall hits, so that way in the fall I can fully be dedicated to this. And yeah, after that, we're going to be covering it is so hot in here. I wish I could ignore it, but I can't. This is like bad. Very bad. But I think we're going to try to push through it. 88 and humid here in Chicago. Well, thank you for tuning in, Max, from Chicago, Illinois. So there's a lot of recruiting news to talk about. I mean, a few months ago, Michigan wasn't even top 50 in recruiting, and now they have a top 8 recruiting class, and it sounds like over this next week they're going to get a few more blue-chip players. And by blue-chip players, I don't mean top 300 or top 400 guys. I mean top 200, top 100, even top 50 guys. Penn State and Ohio State are two schools that have top 10 classes, but their fan bases have been communicating for a while now, either to me or to themselves, that they're a little bit displeased with their recruiting efforts in recent memory, which with Ohio State in particular, it's complicated, and part of me doesn't get it. I mean, right now they have one of the best quality classes in America. They don't have 20 commits yet. I don't know if they will. I don't know how many commits they're looking to get. I don't know if they'll get much more than 20 because they're going to be bringing a lot of guys back, and there's been some recent developments with their NIL deals and packages and how they're going about that I don't know if that's counterproductive or if it's just playing it safe. It's probably a little bit of both. For Penn State, I've heard concerns on that front too. So we'll talk about those a little bit. I'll actually start off with Penn State in the recruiting segment when we do, but I'm just kind of leaning us into it because a lot of these things are delicate. We don't have perfect information. And at the end of the day, recruiting and getting star talent matters. But if you don't have the coaching, if you don't have the development, there will be limitations. And something that I don't think Penn State and Ohio State lack right now is coaching. I think that Ohio State has some questions for certain staffers, but they do not have questions about Ryan Day. And for Penn State, they have questions about Franklin, but I don't really think any of the staffers outside of maybe their wide receivers coach. So coaching-wise, I think Ohio State and Penn State are in good positions, and, well, they have top 10 recruiting classes right now. Some teams who have been on a tear in the recruiting side of things are Michigan, Notre Dame, Georgia, and USC. Michigan especially recently, similarly with Georgia, and Notre Dame and USC have just continued to build on what was already hot momentum for the past few months now. And then talking about the college football playoff participants from 2025 and how I think they'll fare in terms of regressing or improving entering 2025. It's a lot. A lot of the top end schools, a lot of the teams who were top 10 in the team talent composite per 24/7 Sports entering 2024, they lose a ton. And for some of those teams, they actually lose talent. Like they have a net negative in terms of blue chip players or 4 and 5 stars gained, and certainly in terms of production, valuable production coming back versus lost. I know that Texas, Georgia, Ohio State, and Oregon all return around 50% of their production or as low as 43%. Alabama may still be one in the team talent composite, but I think it's pretty clear after 2023, 2022, 2021, and 2024 especially that I don't think Saban's assistant staff was doing all they could have to develop the talent on deck. Still a bunch of freak athletes, still a bunch of high-level NFL picks, but there were some things there that weren't right. And I have some questions about Alabama's staff, if I'm being honest. Coordinators, not really. Head coach, not really. But individual assistant coaches, absolutely. As well as the fact that you're only 2 years removed from a Saban staff that had Tommy Rees, Kevin Steele, that had Eric Wolford, and some other guys that I just don't think were up to the Alabama standard, to be quite frank. I mean, maybe I don't even know what I'm talking about here, but I get the sense that Alabama just wasn't in as good of a place as some said when DeBoer took the job. I think, for example, that Ohio State and Ryan Day entering 24 in hindsight's 2020, were in a much better position than Kalen DeBoer in Alabama, like a way better position. I think that Texas was in a better position. I think that Georgia was in a better position. I think that, honestly, Oregon was in a better position. I think that Michigan wasn't, but I think that Michigan on defense was in a better position. And that's kind of crazy looking at how Alabama recruits versus how Michigan recruits. And I think you can track that in how every one of Saban's teams from 21 to 23, they looked worse. They did on the field. Their ability to play at an A+ level continued to decline year over year over year. And it was the same thing with Alabama last year. For 3 quarters or 2 quarters in that Georgia game, or really just a quarter, they looked phenomenal. And then after Smart made adjustments and after Georgia settled themselves in, Alabama began falling apart, honestly. If not for Beck being turnover prone, Georgia probably comes back and wins that game. So we're not talking about Alabama tonight. That's why I think I was a little bit comfortable going on a tangent there. But we will be talking about a lot of different teams, for sure. I want to start off talking about recruiting. We're going to talk about 6 schools and their recent recruiting developments, but I want to kick it off with Penn State, because Penn State has been hovering inside of the top 10 for a while now. They have the 10th ranked recruiting class in the 2026 cycle and 11 4-stars, 11 3-stars per the composite, 23 overall commits. Their average player rank per commit is an 89.46, and they currently have 241.49 points assigned to their 2026 recruiting class. Their top commit is safety Matt Sieg from McDonald, Pennsylvania, 75th overall player per 24/7 Sports. Their second best player is Kevin Brown from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, 6'5", 270 offensive tackle, top 100 overall player. Some other players to look out for, going to share the remainder of their 4-stars here. Davion Brown, wide receiver from Virginia. Jackson Ford from Pennsylvania, an athlete. Troy Hunn, a quarterback from San Marcos, California. Messiah Mickens, running back from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Terry Wiggins from Coatesville, Pennsylvania, linebacker. Elijah Littlejohn from Charlotte, North Carolina, linebacker. Those are the remainder of your blue chip players per 24/7. And some 3-stars kind of on the edge there. Darryl Carey, safety. David Davis, athlete. And Pierce Peterson, tight end. They beat out Minnesota for him. Minnesota, speaking of which, not to get on a tangent, but Minnesota locking up the top 3 players in their state, all of them all of them 4 stars, and Roman Voss, close to a top 100 overall player, and Minnesota beat out Alabama for him. So impressive by PJ Fleck there and the Minnesota staff. But as for Penn State, it feels like pessimism is sinking in with the fan base, and that's really all you can talk about in terms of recruiting is the fans' perspective. So often these staffs and these organizations operate behind closed doors, and if they're going to be honest with you, it's going to be about recruiting, or it's going to be about the roster. It's not going to be about recruiting. That's my bad for getting that mixed up there. But James Franklin is known notoriously as a coach who, pushes off injuries, doesn't like to talk about them, doesn't exactly keep the program super open. Penn State has 23 commits, again, average ranking per player of an 89.46, which is about a low-level 4-star, about a top 300, top 400 overall player. And of course, these rankings, these player ratings will update as they play their senior seasons, and Penn State may be able to flip some players later in the cycle. I know that they lost their top in-state player to Notre Dame, Joey O'Brien at safety. 98 overall player, 5-star per 24/7 Sports, 30th best player in the country. Peyton Falzone, who is committed to Penn State, he flipped to Auburn at quarterback, and then Tyler Merrill, interior offensive lineman from Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania, is also committed to Notre Dame, along with some other players in the state of Pennsylvania. It sounds like former Penn State running backs coach Jajon Sider has been doing a lot of in-state recruiting on behalf of Notre Dame in Pennsylvania territory, in Penn State territory. Penn State still locked up the majority of their best players in Pennsylvania, though, and I wouldn't be shocked if, whether it's Emmanuel Ahianacho, 5-star offensive tackle, or 5-star defensive end Zion Ely, I would not be shocked if one of those Maryland players ended up going to Penn State at the end of this cycle. Not even talking about the portal, like many have joked about with Chop Robinson going to Maryland and then eventually transferring to Penn State. I'm talking about straight up going from being committed to one recruiting class to being committed to Penn State is what I'm talking about here. So there is room for improvement. Ultimately, Penn State, in terms of paying high schoolers insane amounts of money, unless they have one of the biggest NIL budgets and they're one of the most progressive universities and collectives and alumni in terms of paying players, which they could be, I don't know if they are. If they're not going to be hashing out millions of dollars to high schoolers, because they're hashing out millions of dollars to many future NFL players on the roster that elected to come back and get paid handsome amounts of money. Aller's definitely making several $1 million. I imagine both the running backs, Singleton and Allen, are making $1 million plus in revenue. And look, with the new salary cap per schools, you can still pay players more than the salary cap by engaging with NIL collectives and businesses, and those things can be inflated or changed by market value. I mean, there's so much confusion with NIL, but there is a known with the fact that schools can now pay a few tens of millions of dollars to their student athletes. And for most schools, especially a school like Penn State, a lot of that's going to go to football. So they're paying a lot of players to stay on the roster, paid a lot of them to come back, and they have 23 commits. So they're probably going to get more. They're probably going to land over 25 at the end of the cycle, bring in a large class to supplant the outgoing production that will occur after the 2025 season concludes, when all of those NFL players, or the vast majority of them, run out of eligibility. The next program who has a feeling of pessimism surrounding them is Ohio State. Now, their class is ranked fifth. Why would the fifth-ranked recruiting class have pessimism surrounding it? Well, they have 19 commits, and many of the schools in front of them or around them have matched them in terms of total commits or even surpassed them. And Ohio State is a school that, look, they recruit highly at wide receiver every year. But looking at their current roster, they have 12 5-stars. 5 of them are wide receivers. One of them is C.J. Hicks, a player who many Buckeyes have told me is not playable if you want to win games. The other is Sonny Styles, who's the opposite. If you want to win big games, you play Sonny Styles. Very playable player. Could be a first-rounder, definitely a day 2 player at linebacker. Worst case scenario, he's playing on Sundays somewhere. Absolute worst case scenario. But then the other 5 5-stars, you have Caleb Downs, too. Almost forgot about him. But he transferred to Ohio State. But he's there. So you got Caleb Downs, you have Sonny Styles, C.J. Hicks. 2 of them are going to play. Hicks will be involved in the rotation. And then you have Devin Sanchez. You have Edric Houston. Houston can play, but he's a young player. He'll start, but he's young. You don't have any 5-stars on the offensive line, at least right now. You don't have a 5-star at running back. You have a 5-star at quarterback in Sayin, but again, he's young. And you have, I think, either Pettyjohn or Fahim Delane on defense is also a 5-star, but they're young, true freshmen. I think that there's pessimism surrounding Ohio State because offensive line recruiting has slowed down, although I still love the offensive line class. I don't think there's anything to complain about there. Sam Greer is an absolute animal, almost a top 100 player should be at the end of the cycle. Maxwell Riley is a top 100 player at offensive tackle. And by top 100 player, I mean overall, not at their position. I mean, these are high-level 4-stars we're talking about, and guys who could be 5-stars when it's all said and done. They have a player in Aaron Thomas, who's 6'7", 300, so he's got some upside there. A player in Tucker Smith, who Juck on Bucks, someone I trust with evaluating recruits, has said is underrated, so I just trust him automatically. Shout out to him and the wonderful show that he does. You look at Ohio State's class, though, and to be fair, they have slowed down on O-line recruiting. It doesn't sound like they're going to get Felix Ojo. And then you look at the defensive line recruiting. Their best defensive line commit right now is Kari Wilder, 90 overall player per 24/7 Sports, 246th best player. He's from California. Damari Simeon is a defensive lineman from New Jersey. He is a 3-star per 24/7 Sports, not the composite, just a 3-star. Same thing with Cameron Brinkle. Could be someone who would evolve into a 4-star, but also could not. And they have missed, whether it's on Carter Meadows, whether it is on someone who, his name escapes me, but just committed to Ole Miss today, 4-star. They were in on him. Luke Wafel, used to think his name was pronounced Waffle, but indeed it is Wafel. Well, Luke Waffle, it sounded like he was waffling back and forth, pun intended, and USC decided to drop the mother of all bombs of an NIL deal on him, and Ohio State didn't match it. Whether they didn't because they didn't want to spend that much money or they couldn't, that's a topic for another day. And at the end of the day, they have someone who probably could play really good D-end in Sincere Johnson if he wanted to make the switch, 6'3", 225, top 100 overall player, top 10 linebacker nationally from Cleveland, Ohio. Nice pickup by James Laurinaitis, who I think is a wonderful recruiter and coach for Ohio State. But there's pessimism, I think, surrounding the class because Ohio State wants their team to be complete. The fans do. And Ohio State has been a team that under Ryan Day has typically always lacked in one area or another. It used to be, after his first season in 2019, there wasn't really anything lacking. There wasn't. I mean, the receiver room wasn't what it is now, where you only need 2 seconds before someone's open. But it was still really, really good. Every position on that team was competent at the very worst and elite at the best. In 2020, the defense shows cracks. In 2021, it's almost Alex Grinch level bad. In 2022, the team's more complete, but the secondary is awful, to say the least. In 23, you begin to see major cracks on the offensive line. It looks like that's fixed in 24, but then Josh Simmons goes down, and that's revealed to kind of be a mirage. And the corner room is a little shaky. And then they win it all. But entering 25, D-line recruiting has been on kind of a downward trend for the past 2-3 cycles, despite finishing in the top 5 every season in recruiting. They've been at the bottom by a mile of all top 5 classes when it comes to recruiting high-end, top 100 caliber player defensive linemen. And it looks like that trend's going to continue, just as the offensive line, in terms of depth and in terms of blue chip talent and specifically top 100 level talent, is being fixed. And that has to be frustrating, and I understand why that is frustrating. Similar to Penn State, though, and even more so than Penn State, because I think Penn State right now, Ohio State's average ranking per player is a 92.65 in the 2026 recruiting class with 19 commits. And they still have a crystal ball for safety Braylon Womack, and I imagine they can get some other high-level players. They also have a lot of guys coming back for 2026. I would imagine, with Day being a coach who has worked in the NFL before, with Patricia being a defensive coordinator who's only known the NFL and doesn't know college almost at all outside of what you can study and what he has learned so far being the DC with college players and practicing with them and coaching them up, I imagine Ohio State's looking at roster management a lot earlier than other teams are. I mean, this team last season, they nearly missed out on hosting a playoff game because they lost 2 games in the regular season. And a huge part of the reason why they won it all is because they had a ton of depth and a ton of fresh players. They don't necessarily have that this year, but hypothetically they'll have a lot of that in 26. And like in the NFL, where you can have the best coaching staff and some of the best players, but because talent's a little bit more even and because roster continuity isn't what it was, it's never been in the NFL like it was in the 2010s for college football, and it's not going to be that way ever again in college football, probably, at least for a little bit. By a little bit, I mean a decade at best, maybe much more than that, maybe ever. Maybe you'll never have the depth that you had in the 2010s. I imagine Ohio State's kind of having that conversation a little bit where we can sign a smaller class with some high quality guys, spend a little bit more in the portal entering 2026, and then for the 2027 recruiting class, when we have a lot of guys leaving after that year when our roster's much older, well, we can sign a huge class then, maybe the number 1 class in America. And even then, Ohio State, it's June. It's going to be July tomorrow. It's June 30th at the time of this recording, but it's the summer. So much can change. A lot can change. Flips can happen. Ohio State can maybe pivot towards spending more on certain players. And there you have it. The last thing I'll say about Ohio State before we move on and talk about some teams that have had a more optimistic feel about recruiting in these recent months is that there are no rules in the current NIL landscape. There are, but you can easily skirt them. You can easily skirt them. I mean, Georgia is paying big money. Texas is still paying big money. I know Oregon's still paying big money. We all know that USC paid Mark Bowman essentially Bryce Underwood money, and Underwood is worth more than Mark Bowman. And I can only imagine what USC has paid other players. It was reported they paid Wafel around $2 million per year, and he's not a 5-star defensive end. All I'm saying is if all of those schools are doing that, they know something. They know something. They know there is a loophole. They know, or several loopholes plural. They know that they can either skirt the intended rules or skirt the rules, or that these rules aren't enforceable, or that they don't really exist at all. If what I'm hearing from people, whether it's Ohio State fans on X, or whether it's, Berm, one of their beat writers, and some other people close to him who've relayed what he said publicly, that's bad. That's not good at all. That is taking out a 12-gauge shotgun, which Ohio State has a plethora of them because they're loaded, they're rich, I mean, they are, and taking all factors in, they are the program in the Big Ten outside of maybe USC, maybe Michigan, maybe Oregon. Those are maybes. Maybes. Like Ohio State, honestly, has a tie-breaking edge over all of them with their past history, with their current head coach in Ryan Day, who I think is the best in the Big Ten, would be the best in the nation if not for Kirby Smart. The fact that they have a whole state that is more dedicated to college football and to football in general than I think any other state in the Big Ten. To just put that out there, I think Ohio cares more about their football than probably any other state in the Big Ten. What you're doing is you're taking your advantage and you're either turning it off or you're turning your own advantage on yourself and you're blowing your foot off with the shotgun. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't. There are no rules that people are breaking. That's not happening. Or if it is, it's not in the space of NIL. It just isn't. Read the fine text in the House settlement and then line it up with the fact that college football does not have a collective bargaining agreement. These players have not been, they have not agreed to have their salaries regulated. They haven't. I mean, look at what Florida State's doing. This is something that my friend Bald Father Betts told me. This is something that my friend Juck on Bucks has even relayed on his channel. And again, another shout out to Juck on Bucks and shout out to Bald Father Betts. Just look them up. Type their name in the YouTube search bar, first thing that'll come up there, and subscribe to them. They do wonderful work. Bald Father Betts on the betting side and game-by-game analysis side. Juck on Bucks with recruiting, a game-by-game analysis as well. Everything Ohio State football. The point that I was getting to is that, did I just forget what I was talking about? I was talking about recruiting and Ohio State, and then I decided to shout out Juck on Bucks and Bald Father Betts. I was talking about how Ohio State was turning off their advantage, which, I mean, that's what they're doing if the reports are true. Oh, yes, Florida State. Florida State is trying to get their players to sign a contract where every year their team can extend it for the same base salary at random and just keep them around, regardless of what they want. And if they want to leave, they would have to pay that salary to Florida State. So, for example, if Ohio State wanted to go in and a Florida State player is getting paid $1 million per year, and Ohio State says, hey, you're really good. We want to win it all in 2026. We'll pay you $1 million extra. Well, what they have to do is they raise $1 million. They have to then pay the player another $1 million because he has to pay back to Florida State. And then, so you're out $2 million right there. And then you have to pay Florida State, the school, another $1 million to get him out. So that's $3 million right there. And it's a total ripoff for a player at Florida State, for example. And that's a school who probably to a certain degree is trying to use these new rules to their advantage, and that's not going to work. That's total loser energy from Florida State, and it's not going to work. Florida State under Mike Norvell is a lost program. They are not going to fix the issues that were prevalent last season. He is not going to win them a natty. He will not win them the ACC consistently. Sweeney, in hindsight, was right about his approach versus Florida State's approach. He was, and that's something I underestimated of Dabo when it came to the portal and recruiting. He was right, and Mike Norvell was wrong. And as for Ohio State, I will close on this. If you're the Buckeyes, why handicap yourself? I mean, you are a winner from the standpoint of player NIL deals being influenced by their local market value. Because in Columbus, all anyone cares about is Ohio State football. And your brand is the largest in America, which means non-affiliated businesses that won't be checked by the clearinghouse will be more open to doing business with you because they'll have the most to gain from it than anyone else in all of college football. So I don't understand. If what is being said is true, I don't get it. Because at that point, what you've done is you've permanently missed out on some players that could be game changers, and you've lowered your ceiling, you've lowered your roster talent, at least probably in the future. Again, it is summer. So from those standpoints, I understand what the frustration is, but I trust Ryan Day ultimately. And you have a top 5 recruiting class. Like, even if Ohio State is restricting themselves in the way that their fans and some beat writers are saying, they will be fine at the end of the day. Their recruiting will be just fine. They will never sign a recruiting class outside of the top 10. And if they do, then I'm not going to say that I was wrong in saying that, because something unforeseen would have happened. Either they got fired, which I don't think will happen, or new rules were enforced or made that somehow disproportionately affected Ohio State in a negative way. Under the current circumstances, they will never sign a recruiting class outside the top 10, ever. And most of their recruiting classes will be in that, top 5 or hovering around that 5 spot. And I say that because in recent memory, they haven't signed the number 2 or number 1 recruiting class. That's been Texas, that's been Georgia, that's been Alabama, that's been Oregon if you factor in the portal. Ohio State's typically been just anywhere from number 3 to number 5, and that's probably where they'll stay in the future. Maybe a little bit lower with USC getting re-engaged, with Oregon continuing to recruit at a high level. There's more teams competing for that number 1 spot. Well, it used to be just Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, and maybe for some years Clemson. And the more competition you have for that top spot, especially if you're outside of the Deep South, so you don't have, natural close pipelines to just pull in-state talent from. Ohio football is good, but it's not Georgia football. It's not Texas football. Certainly not those two, but I'm not comfortable enough to say what else it isn't in the Deep South. Like Georgia, with Kirby Smart and how they're approaching things right now, and we're actually going to talk about Georgia here very soon. With how Georgia's approaching things, they're not going to sign a class ever under Smart that's outside of the top 4, outside the top 5. I mean, that won't happen. With Ohio State, because they're in the North, they don't have the same, conference or local pipelines that a Georgia or a Texas or now a USC does. Their recruiting floor might be lower than some schools at the top. I think it's lower than Texas. I think it's lower than Georgia. Could be lower than USC, depending on what USC does. Could even... Actually, no, that's it. So if your recruiting floor is the 4th lowest, it may be a little bit frustrating because it used to be the 3rd lowest or maybe the 2nd lowest, but you're still recruiting top 5 every year, and you have the coach to win it all and be in the contention to win it all every year. I made a tweet about that, and people got mad at it for some reason. The tweet was basically saying, with how NIL's going and with how many teams are fighting for that number 1 spot, your Georgias, Alabamas, and Ohio States are going to have much lower recruiting floors than they used to. By much lower, I mean, instead of being guaranteed a top 3 class every year, you're maybe guaranteed a top 6 class, which is lower. It is, and it's actually can be in some years significantly lower, but because you were significantly ahead of everyone else, you're still ahead of basically everyone else. For Georgia, I might have to even recant that because they have the number 2 recruiting class right now, a 5-star, 17 4-stars, 6 3-stars, 25 commits, and an average player rank per commit of a 92.2. It absolutely bananas. It's crazy. What they're doing right there. And let's go over some of their commits right now. So they have Jared Curtis ranked as the 3rd best quarterback in America right now per 24/7 Sports. Akeem Ogboku, offensive tackle from North Carolina, top 50 player. Jordan Smith, safety from Georgia, 4-star. Justice Fitzpatrick they got from Florida over Ohio State, and I believe, I don't know who else was the other contender, maybe Florida, maybe Miami, Florida, I forget. James Johnson, another top 100 player, defensive lineman from Florida. Caden Harris, corner from Tennessee. All these players so far that I've named are top 100 players. Zach Fort, safety. from Florida, top 150 player. Pierre Dean, Jay Lamar, Kamari Brooks, Chase Calicut, Shadarius Tootle, Lincoln Keys. All of these players I just named are 4 stars or better per 24/7. And then Craig Dandridge, Graham Houston, Carter Lucky are some players who could probably contend for 4-star status at the end of the cycle. And I just got so invested with Ohio State recruiting there for a minute that I brushed past some of their top commits, but we all know about Chris Henry Jr., probably 6'6" now, well over 200 pounds. He's going to be a beast. He should be a 5-star right now. I don't get why he's only the 38th ranked player. They got Blaine Bradford, Caden Dixon-Wyatt, Maxwell Riley, Simeon Caldwell, Jordan Thomas, Jacob Witherspoon. We already talked about Sam Greer, Maxwell Riley, and Sincere Johnson. Jaden Ricketts, Kari Wilder. Favor Aki is someone who's not quite a 4-star player per 24/7 Sports yet, but he should be after his senior season is played out in Delaware, Ohio. But back to Georgia. Georgia and Ohio State right now, fitting that they're back-to-back. It sounds like they're taking recruiting on opposite ends of the spectrum. That's kind of what it sounds like right now, where Georgia is going all out. Kirby Smart is saying, I'm not going to be hunted. They're paying players. They're ponying up deals. Now, I don't think Day is the opposite of Kirby in the way that he's willing to be hunted. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that there is a different approach being taken in how they are recruiting. I don't think Day views himself as being hunted right now whatsoever. I don't think that's the case at all. I think Day's mind is on other things, and he's coming off a national title win. That guy with a 70-10 record is not being hunted. But also, the guy who holds the longest regular season win streak, the longest overall win streak in SEC history, he is certainly not being hunted. Number 2 class, abundant optimism, 25 commits. I wouldn't be shocked if they surpassed USC for the number 1 class at the end of the year. Georgia is this team where you look at this season, or what could be this season's class for the 2026 cycle, ranked 2nd. You look at 2025, 2nd overall, just ahead of Oregon, who signed the highest quality class by a mile, but they lacked a little bit in quantity, where Georgia and Texas, who were number 2 and number 1 respectively, exceeded them. The 2024 cycle, Georgia signed 41 overall commits, 41 of them, so portal and high school. Number 1 overall class. 2023, number 2 overall class, ahead of Texas, behind Alabama. In the 2022 recruiting class, 3rd, behind Alabama, behind that A&M class that all fizzled out, failed to develop, or went in the portal, and ahead of Ohio State and ahead of Texas. And of course, in 2021, they were 4th, behind LSU, behind Ohio State, behind Alabama. And I mean, yes, there could be some 2020 players that are still on Georgia's roster, but they're I could probably count them with my hand, or maybe with both my hands, but certainly no more than that. Georgia is this team that has done this, and by this I mean lose a bunch of great underclassmen and seniors and juniors to the NFL, many of whom leave before they have to, and they just reload. Last season, everything went wrong for Georgia that could have. The quarterback regressed despite coming back. The O-line was banged up all season long. The secondary didn't pan out. The receivers panned out at this abysmal rate. Georgia couldn't run the football, even with Trevor Etienne and a talented offensive line. The defensive line, while good and great, had some inconsistencies at times. There was no tight end. Tight end dropped off massively with Bowers leaving. We knew it was going to be a drop-off, but I didn't think it'd be that big. Everything went wrong with Georgia. And yet they won the SEC. They won 11 games. They physically kicked Texas's butt and pulled their esophagus out of their mouth 2 times. Where the only reason Texas competed with them is because Texas had the air advantage. They had the much better secondary, much better wide receiver group, and the more talented quarterback. Georgia, especially their D-line versus Texas's O-line just owned in the trenches, was more physical, was better coached, and that's why they beat them. And then entering the 2025 season, Georgia signed a class that per of 24/7 Sports was the best. Per the composite, it was the second best. This is at a high school. Their average player rank was a 93.03. The only teams that were better were Alabama, Texas, and Oregon, who signed anywhere from 2 to 8 fewer commits than Georgia did. Georgia has been bringing in a lot of bodies, and high-quality bodies, too. They have the number one head coach, a top 3 staff, and right now they have limitless recruiting momentum. That's terrifying to me. I would say right now they have the most momentum out of any program in recruiting. Notre Dame, Notre Dame has a lot of momentum. Michigan has a lot of momentum. Alabama has momentum. Oregon, I think, is about to regain a lot of momentum. And, of course, USC does. But with the staff and head coach combination, the recruiting and development and culture combination, you can't ask more out of Georgia right now. I mean, right now they have a higher quality class than USC. The only reason they're not number one ahead of USC is USC has 5 more commits, and if Georgia gets 2 more 4-stars, they probably take over that number 1 spot. And I imagine they're going to get a lot. They're going to get more players. I mean, they're in the running for Tyler Atkinson, for example, 5-star linebacker that Oregon, Texas, and Ohio State clearly want. All of his suitors are top 5 recruiting programs, and programs who at the absolute worst are top 8 in recent memory. They're in the running for him. They'll probably get him. I would venture it's going to be Georgia, Texas, or Oregon that ends up landing him. And if I were him, I would stay in the SEC. Like just by recent track record on defense plus staff continuity. Like, I don't trust Lupoy at Oregon. Ohio State is a new DC in Patricia, who, yes, is an NFL guy, but there's newness there. And Georgia has this insane track record with linebackers. Texas, I think, is about to with where Anthony Hill will get drafted. And they're going to have the best defense in college football at best and a top 3 one at worst this coming year, which I don't think anyone else can say they have that high of a floor on defense that Texas should in 2025. So Georgia recruiting is on a tear. They're absolutely on fire. Michigan is too. Not nearly the same quality, 91.23 average rank per recruit, 18 commits, 8th ranked class. The optimism, though, for Michigan is budding, and it's budding because a few months ago they weren't even inside the top 50. Now they're inside the top 10. And for Michigan, I think it's more important to tell you who they can still get, because it sounds like their board is wide open. For Ohio State, for example, part of the reason I talked about them and how I understood the pessimistic point of view that a lot of their fans have about their class is it sounds like their board is pretty small from here on out. Now, again, it's summer. I think Ohio State's going to finish with a higher ranked recruiting class than Michigan because insert benefit of the doubt. That's what's always happened. Always happened. And not saying it can't happen, Michigan's probably in the best possible position they've ever been in to out-recruit Ohio State in a given cycle. But Ohio State's 1.42 points higher in average rank per commit than Michigan is, which is an insane bar to cross. It just is. And they have an additional commit, and they have better pipelines. And after last season, they have a better recent history. If Michigan wanted to say they had the better recent history, they would have had to win an additional game or two, or at least reach the playoff last season. But this class it's wonderful. It's a great class right now. It actually says it's ranked 9th, so I think Alabama just got a commit in the last few minutes or an hour. But Carter Meadows, they got yesterday. Top 50 overall player. Zion Robinson is the top 100 wide receiver from Texas, who they have. Titan Davis, Brady Smigiel, Andre Clark Jr., Malachi Lee, 6'6", 318 pounds from Hawaii. Michigan got him over Texas, Alabama, and Georgia. Alistair Vallejo, defensive tackle, 300-plus pounds from Texas. Mikhail Blade, kind of more of a hybrid player on the D-line from Chicago, Illinois. Matt Ludwig, those are all the 4-stars, and then Brody Jennings and Mason Bonner could maybe contend for being 4-stars at the end of the 2026 cycle. But with Michigan, see, a lot of these other teams, I haven't talked about a lot about who they're going after. For Georgia, Tyler Atkinson, the same thing for Ohio State, although it sounds like there's been a waning of the relationship there. You could say the same for Oregon, although we're not talking about them today. And then with Penn State, I've talked about some guys who they could flip, but those classes are all bigger than Michigan's or higher quality. And Michigan's been on a tear, and they have a donor base that probably isn't as widespread and maybe as diverse as USC's is in terms of the amount of ultra-wealthy alumni that are involved. But they have Larry Ellison as a part of their collective. And that's insane. It's honestly insane. The fact that they can have the second richest man in the world paying their players. And as I've mentioned earlier, there is nothing that is stopping this. There's nothing that's stopping it, because Ellison's wealthy enough and he owns enough companies and businesses to where he can make himself unaffiliated. And then no one's checking him, from my understanding. There's people who will dispute with me on that, and I can see where they're coming from. But at this point, with how Georgia and USC and all these other schools are recruiting, I'm going to assume that there aren't many rules holding these teams back, unless we think cheating is so rampant that only 10% of places aren't overtly cheating. And maybe that is college football. I know cheating is a part of college football, but I don't think Smart or Sarkisian or Riley would be dumb enough to... I mean, what about Clemson? Clemson is a top 10 class after finishing almost outside the top 25 last year. They're definitely paying players. They're probably paying some of them handsome funds. To think that they are dumb enough to get themselves caught in an obvious web is, I think, a little bit misguided. But Michigan's going after Savion Hyder, 5-star running back, Calvin Russell, 5-star wide receiver. From what people have told me, it sounds like he's down to Michigan and Syracuse, but Michigan's probably in the lead. Celesi Moa, Devon Benjamin, John Turrentine III. These are all players who are top 100. Braden Rouse. If they just land half of them, this is guaranteed to be a top 10 class, and a class that may be higher than that in terms of average player quality. Sharon Moore has established himself as certainly a better recruiter than Jim Harbaugh. Now, better head coach? No, absolutely not. Better game manager? Absolutely not. He has a lot to prove on the field, but off the field, he's attracting the right energy. He's making the correct relationships. I think that him and his staff are doing a good job of making offers to players, and they've done it consistently enough this year and last year to where I think they can afford to pay players, whether they match market value or go over market value. If you're Michigan, with the fact that, look, recently you are not Georgia, you are not Ohio State, you are not Alabama. Past 4 years, you are, because you won it all, won the Big Ten 3 times. But beyond that, and many of these players watched football and their parents have watched football long before Michigan went on that impressive run, you are not those teams. You aren't. I mean, in recent history, you are not even Oregon. In the 21st century, you are Wisconsin. That's what you are. You are Penn State. Well, Wisconsin's probably too harsh, but I think you get the point. They have not had seasons like Michigan did in 2014 or 2009. They haven't. So in understanding that, for Michigan to recruit at a high level, they have to be go-getters on the trail, and I think that this staff is, and you probably have to overpay a little bit. In order to get, someone to commit to you over Ohio State, and you're both fiercely battling there, you have to offer more than Ohio State does. Maybe with some exceptions, because there are recent developments that show at some positions Michigan's better at developing than Ohio State is. They've had more success there, like the entirety of the D line. But for most positions, an Alabama, Ohio State, or Georgia has developed either better than you over the previous 10 years, 15, and that's what a lot of these parents are looking at, kids too, because they're still young, looking for advice. And, they don't know what the punishments will look like. And you just went 8-5 last year. So the fact that Michigan's recruiting this well, I think, is impressive and shows that at least for off the field things, they have what they need to be. They have what they need to have in order. And then we got Notre Dame recruiting. Their class rank is 3rd. There's a lot of budding optimism within Notre Dame recruiting. Tons of it. Excuse me there. A lot of optimism. 22 commits, 92.46 average per commit. They were the number 2 class until a few days ago when Georgia got more commits and caught up to Notre Dame's quality. But they have Rodney Dunham, 5-star edge, Joey O'Brien, 5-star safety, Kari Adams, Ian Premer, Javion Osborne, Aiden Pouncey, Jonas Walton, Thomas Davis Jr., Noah Grubbs, Gregory Patrick, Bubba Frazier, Tyler Merrill, Ebenezer Iwatadi. Those are all 4 stars or higher. And then Jacoby Clapper, Ben Nichols, Grayson McKeough. Those are some players who could level up into the 4-star range by the end of their senior season for 2025 high school football. I don't know where this class is going to go from here. I kind of feel like this is a pretty complete class for Notre Dame. Just looking at their prospects per the 24/7 Sports board, it looks like they have everyone they want with the exception of Elijah Golden and Noah Clark, defensive linemen from Florida and North Carolina, respectively. But it feels like they have basically all the high-level players that they would want to have. I'm curious to see if they'll be able to hold on to all of those players. I imagine they'll hold on to 90-95% of them, but it'd be interesting to see if a little bit of what happened last year happened to them again, where they lose a top-end player or maybe 2 or 3, and they get bumped down in the standings, still finishing with a great class, but missing out on an elite class. Freeman's recruiting at a high level. They're developing at a high level. I love the staff that Notre Dame has. It's very brief here because we haven't had a lot of recent news, a ton of it at least with Notre Dame, but there's still a lot of optimism there because if they finish with the 3rd best class, and there's a chance they can, then that's a historic achievement and a historic class for Marcus Freeman and Notre Dame. And last but not least, this one will probably be brief too because there hasn't been much recent news with USC, but they have the number 1 class still, average player ranking of a 91.89, 30 total commits. Keeney Pepe, Mark Bowman, offensive tackle and tight end are the only 5 stars of the bunch, and they have top 100 players, Talanoa Ili, Samote Kadewanga, Jamian Winfield, Tomohini Topi, Deshaun Redo, and then Albert Hill, ironically, is just 1 spot removed from the top 100 there at corner. I mean, they have a wonderful, wonderful class. And I think they're mostly done, but I imagine that whether it's Jalen Lott from Frisco, Texas, athlete who 24/7 Sports lists as warm for USC, they're warm for Devon Benjamin, KJ Ford, someone told me they're out on him. Don't know how true that is because it was actually a commenter on my video. But a lot of my viewers are intelligent, so I at least try and read what they say. This is a mostly, I think, complete class, but I wouldn't be shocked if maybe they made headlines and offered a high-level player a ton of money and just got him like that. And I think they'll keep a lot of these commits and probably add some more. I imagine they finish anywhere from 33, 34 to 35 commits is what they have for the 2026 class. I imagine is what USC finishes with. This is an elite class. And with the staff that USC has, they're going to develop this class rather excellently. So even without a lot of the recent developments, the fact they're keeping these players committed, and with the staff moves they've made, the future of USC is what looks bright. The present is where there are questions. But if they can survive the present, I love the future outlook for USC. I think that under the current rules, and if USC starts winning again, which I do think will happen, I'm picking them to reach the playoffs this year, USC is a really good shot of being the number 1 recruiting program moving forward. And at that point, you're talking about reigniting something as close to what you can get to the Pete Carroll dynasty at USC. All right. Um, Now I think it's time to talk about. Well, I don't know. It's been an hour. I didn't mean to make that recruiting segment 40 minutes long, but I did. Um, uh, yeah, I didn't mean to go that long on the recruiting stuff, but I think it's worth it. I think it's worth it. Um, yeah. Um, okay, Tyler McDowell drummer. Hey everyone. Um, and then Jamie Fernandez 8820. Fight on. Yeah, fight on. I think USC's in a really, really good position. Really good position. I am going to go to the bathroom, and then I will be right back. More so to get a drink of water. It's as I said earlier. It's hot up here, 77 degrees. I'm surprised I was able to get through that segment without pouring sweat and messing up a lot. So just stay tight, all 41 of you. I will be right back, and this will be edited out of the show when I post it to Spotify. Alrighty, everyone. So we'll be back. We'll be back on Wednesday at the latest with some more stuff, and there will be obviously the recruiting thing will be clipped. It'll be released tomorrow. It's steaming hot up here. There's also some things I have to do early this week before I'm out of town from Wednesday night to Sunday or Saturday. So we'll be back. The college football playoff contender segment will be held rather soon. So thank you for tuning in. Yeah, I'll catch you guys later. Sorry for the recent like delays and all that different stuff. It's a very chaotic time for my family and I, but in the fall, and I'm hoping even as soon as next week, I'm hoping that there's absolute non-negotiables to where that stuff won't happen. So I'll see you guys very soon. Thank you again for tuning in. Bucks by Fitty just said, "No, I got here at the end." Yes, I'm sorry. Again, guys, sometimes things get delayed, but you can count you can count on me typically being live Sunday, Monday, or Wednesday at 6 p.m. Eastern time. And yeah, during the regular season we'll be live for a fourth time as well to cover all the different games and all that different stuff. So I'll see you guys very soon. Thank you for tuning in. The recruiting segment will be up tomorrow, and yeah, there will be other content like conference predictions that are separate from the live shows that'll be released this week. See you guys.